besides just time, date, timestamp, and so on, we also have another somewhat related data type called an interval. You should think of an interval as being like a duration of time. We can specify an interval by putting down 1 day, or 1d, short for day. We can even create a duration of time like 1 day, 1 minute, 1 second by putting in 1d, 1m, 1s. Now, at first glance, looks like interval isn't super useful. Okay, so we can store some kind of duration or something like that. Well, let's just play around with interval a little bit, and I'll show you why it is extremely useful. Okay, so back over here, we're going to once again put down our set of parentheses, put in a string, and I'll put in 1 day, colon, interval, like so. So I'll run that, and I get back 1 day. As we saw inside that diagram, we can also, instead of saying day, just put in capital D right there. That gets treated as 1 day as well. We could put in 1H, short for 1 hour, or how about 20 hours? Why not? And now we get 1 day and 20 hours. And we can keep on going there, so 20 hours, maybe 30 minutes, and 45 seconds. So at this point, okay, so we can store some kind of duration. Is that very useful? Well, all this discussion we're having right now is around data types and generally in the world of applying a data type to a column, like when we're creating a table. But I just want to do a very quick side thing here and show you why we care about intervals at all. So at this point, okay, we can store an interval or kind of a duration inside of a column or inside of a table, a row of a column. But why do we care about that at all? Well, it turns out that we can actually do numeric operations on intervals. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to select the result of this interval right here. So 1 day, 20 hours, 30 minutes, 45 seconds. And then I'm going to subtract. That's where the magic comes from. I'm going to subtract out 1 day. And I'm going to also mark that as interval. So kind of think about this a little bit. If we had 1 day and 20 hours and something else, and we subtracted 1 day, we would probably be left with just 20 hours. So we can run this. Okay, I know it wants to run. Come on, you. Oh, this is irritating when it refuses. There we go. Now we're left with just 20 hours. So with these durations, we can totally abstract out the idea of days, hours, minutes, seconds when it comes to actually doing the math behind the stuff. And we can just do subtraction and addition of intervals and be left with some actual useful information. We can also make use of intervals to add or subtract time from dates as well. Not only dates, but also times and timestamps. So for example, we'll take a look at a value that we put together in the last video, something like, how about November 11th or 20th, how about that, 1980. And we'll say that we want to select a time of 1:23 a.m. on the eastern coast of the United States. And I'll mark that as a time stamp with time zone. So we can take a date, or timestamp in this case, like this, and then subtract from it an interval. Just to make this very easy to read, I'm going to put on the next line down. I'll put the subtraction right there, and then right here I'll say, from this particular point in time, I want to subtract 1 day. I'll make sure I turn that into an interval as well. Okay, so I'll run that, and now notice that we get 1980, 11, 18 right there. So I could change that to a 4. Now we're going to take off 4 days, and now we're left with 1980, November 15th. So storing intervals inside of a table, not super useful, not crazy useful. Maybe you could think of some use for it. But the fact that we can make use of intervals to manipulate some other date or time, that is fantastic. That is something that's very useful, something that we very much might want to do at some point in time. Now, as a real quick side note, this video is all about intervals. I just want you to know we can also do some numeric stuff between two timestamps or dates or times as well. So for example, if I want to find the number of days between November 20th minus some day in the past, before that, like let's say about November, 10th. Now we're going to find the number of days between November 10th and November 20th. So I'll run that and I get back 10 days. Now, of course, you and I could probably do the math there very easily, but we can also mix into this different times and even time zones as well. So let's find the duration difference between November 20th at 11:23 a.m. on Eastern Standard Time, and how about 5:43 a.m. on the Pacific coast of the United States. Then we can run that, and it will tell us the difference between those two date times or timestamps is 9 days, 16 hours, and 40 minutes. Now, being able to do this at the database level, as opposed to having to get some kind of specialized library at your server, so like a JavaScript library or Java or Python or whatever else, doing this at the database, that is fantastic, very useful, because it means we don't need some extra library at our server. We can just make use of the database to do all these duration calculations for us. So again, intervals, storing them inside of a table, maybe not the most useful thing in the world, but making use of them to actually do some kind of calculation, absolutely fantastic. Something that we definitely might want to use at some point in time. Okay, so that's pretty much it for times, date times, timestamps, intervals. Let's take a pause right here.